So, welcome to this module 4, where we were talking about the implementation part of change, and in this module basically we are going to discuss about two major approaches which have been developed lately. One is known as positive organizational scholarship, or it is also called positive organizational behavior approach, and the next one is sense making approach. Before that, as you remember, in the last few sessions we have talked about some of the approaches related to the implementation of change, and these include organizational development, which is a planned approach to change. We also discussed about appreciative inquiry, where we try to rely more on our strength and build on that to bring about a change, and we also talked about action research approach. So, in the same continuation, now we are going to discuss about two major approaches to implement change in the organizations. The idea of discussing these approaches to change is to understand that when we are going to implement change, how these approaches could be utilized to make significant changes or making them successful, right. So, we are proceeding with this positive organizational scholarship approach. Now, if you look at this positive organizational scholarship approach, like appreciative inquiry, where you are going to look at the strength of the organization or the competence of the people to build and bring about a significant change. The positive organizational scholarship approach also has a very positive perspective to bring about a significant change. Now, when I am talking about a positive perspective, it means that it is based on the strength and the potential of the people, and how we can use this strength and the potential of the people to bring about a change. Now, this strength and potential which we have been talking about is related to something that is positive, not something where we are going to diagnose certain things or certain problems to improve the quality of life. Now, if you look at this positive organizational approach, it says that we need to focus on strength and potential of the people, and this could help us to prevent lot of problems at the workplace and improve our quality of working life or quality of life in general. Now, in positive organizational scholarship, basically people have talked about positive organizational behavior. Now, as you know that organizational behavior talks about the behavior of the individual, group and organizations in the context of the organization. So, what we have certain models of organizational behavior, okay, and in these models we try to find out what are the antecedents and what are the consequences of certain variables which could be of relevance to the organization, right. And then we try to see that how we can see that there is a positive relationship among these antecedent and consequences, right. And the input in OB is coming from various social science discipline. So, the model that have been used in organizational behavior research is appear to be more diagnostic in nature, right. Now, there has been a shift in the research in the area of OB, and now people are trying to develop frameworks and concepts which are based on positive approach. So, what they say that you need to look at the strength and the capacities of the people, and how you can make use of these strength and capabilities to bring about a change, or how can you bring about a better outcome using strength and resources, whether it is performance, whether it is effectiveness, or whether it is satisfaction of the employees. So, if you look at the field of positive organizational behavior as such, they try to apply the concepts which have been developed in the area of positive organizational behavior, and then they have been measured, and then they try to see that how it can be used to manage the performance of the people at the workplace or in the organizations. Now, let us look what are those concepts and other things which have been used in studying positive organizational behavior. Now, the basic idea is that if you are using a diagnostic approach, then it may not be good. So, basically in the diagnostic approach, you try to find out the causes and the impact of that, and then you see that what kind of interventions can be brought in to ensure that the causes are removed, and then you have a better outcome. Now, when we try to study it from the perspective of positive organizational behavior, the input is coming from positive psychology, right. So, if when you are going to use this positive word basically to understand the behavior of people and the dynamics involved therein, right, from a positive perspective, then it is better in the sense that it is going to help you to understand the behavior of people in the context of the organization, right. And that is why most of the researchers today talk about positive organizational behavior, and some of the components or the concepts that have been used in positive organizational behaviors include like optimism, resilience, hope, confidence, emotional intelligence, well-being, positive psychological capital, right. So, some of these make up what we call psychological capital. So, psychological capital is what? It is a kind of resource related to the people which can be utilized to build up significant changes in terms of performance, effectiveness and satisfaction. Now, if you look at some of these variables that have been studied in positive organizational behavior and how they have been applied to bring about a change. Say optimism, there could be two perspectives to the change, one is optimistic and one could be pessimistic perspective. So, it is always good to adopt a positive perspective, that is optimism, that yes, we are hopeful or we think that yes, if you are going for this kind of change, it would bring significant outcome, positive outcome you can say for the organization, right. So, optimism is something that is more positive. Similarly, if you look at resilience, how resilience has been defined, right. Resilience is understood to be a state where people try to bounce back in case of their adversaries, their adverse situations, difficult life propositions. So, how they overcome these kind of propositions in the life and come back. So, how this can be applied in the change management perspective. So, if you look at resilience, it means if you find that yes, this change is going to create a lot of problem among the people in terms of increasing the anxiety level, stress, then how you can build up this resilience, so that people are able to bounce back more effectively, get rid of the say anxiety and say stress and work for the betterment of the organization. Hope is also again a positive perspective like optimism, right, where you think that yes, things are going to be better provided we go for this kind of change. And then confidence is another important variable, right. If you are not confident enough, if you think that you can do it, then probably you will be able to do it. So, it shows that yes, you have confidence, and if the confidence level is good or high, then things become easy, because if you are not confident about bringing about a significant change, then there could be lot of problems at a later stage. But if you are confident that yes, this kind of change would bring significant impact or result for the organization, that too in a positive way, then that really helps, because that is very important factor. So, building confidence is equally important among the employees. So, you need to build up confidence in change managers who want to bring change. You also need to build in confidence or take people in confidence, so that they are ready to accept these kind of changes. And that is how these concepts have been utilized in change management. Then emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence again is different from the kind of general intelligence that we have been talking about. So, it basically talks about understanding, stability, empathizing with others, motivating, right, so that you are able to better understand yourself as well as others, right. So, when we are talking about emotional intelligence, it relates to what? It shows that you have some kind of maturity, where you are in a better position to understand your behavior as well as other behaviors. So, it can be said that if people are emotionally intelligent, then they are going to be more stable. They would be in a position to understand what is going on, how it is going to impact the behavior, and then take certain actions accordingly to ensure that change is successful, right. Then another variable is psychological well-being, right. Psychological well-being, which shows that are you really feeling good and happy about the thing which is going on, right. If it does not make happy and satisfied, then probably will not go for it. So, you also need to ensure or take care of psychological well-being of the people when you are going to bring about any kind of say change. The next variable is positive psychological capital, right. So, this confidence, hope, resilience, optimism together basically form a cluster which is known as psychological capital. So, whatever variables we have been talking about in terms of optimism, resilience, hope, confidence, they are basically part of the psychological capital, which is nothing else, but it provides you a strength, and it can also be used as a resource to ensure that you make use of these resources to better understand and interpret the things, and then the process of change is going to be much more smooth. So, if with these kind of things, with these positive perspective, especially if you move to ensure that the change is going to be successful, then you will be in a better position to implement that. Now, when we are talking about positive organizational behavior, Luthans have also developed certain frameworks, a model which is known as CHOOSE model, which is nothing else but what we have been talking about right now, which include confidence, hope, optimism, subjective well-being and emotional intelligence, right. So, confidence, efficacy, it means believing in yourself, believing in your capability. Hope, optimism, I will already talked about. Subjective well-being means how you feel about yourself in terms of internal happiness. Then emotional intelligence talk about your understanding, your maturity, your stability in behavior, right. So, all these are basically the dimensions of positive organizational behavior, which is very very important, and this particular approach in change management have been used recently to bring about significant changes through people, because if people are being guided by these kind of say behavior, then they better accept the change compared to others. Moving further, we are going to talk about another approach which is known as sense making approach to change management. Now, when I am talking about the sense making approach to change management, let us first understand what does it mean, why we call it a sense making approach, right. Sense making is basically nothing else, but you try to understand and interpret things, so that you are able to find out something that is meaningful and worthwhile, right. Suppose you are going to do certain things, then you say that whether it really makes sense for you to go for it. What does it mean? It means you try to see whether by going by doing this kind of thing, is it really worth, is it going to really contribute to your performance, or is it really going to be helpful to you or not. So, if it makes sense, you go for it, otherwise do not go for it, right. The same analogy can be given in the context of change management. So, basically this approach talks about understanding and interpreting certain events, and if you think that these events are good, it is going to benefit you, it really makes sense, because that it is being done which is really meaningful, worthwhile, will contribute to performance, then you go for it, right. Otherwise, you do not go for it. It means, if you are able to make sense of the things by understanding and interpreting it, giving a meaning to it, then the resistance to change would be less, and you will be better position to implement and see that people are going to be committed and accept the change in a better way. Now, with this preamble, let us discuss some of the issues related to change management. See, to start with, this was made famous by Korlevik, and then he wrote a book, Sense Making in Organizations, and he said that it is a process through which people try to understand issues or events which are not clear to them, right. So, if organization wants to bring about a change, say they want to go for technological changes or certain changes which is not clear to you. So, what you do? You try to understand what exactly is happening, what kind of change is being brought in. So, something that is novel, ambiguous, which is not clear, or something that is confusing, right, which is also violating your expectations from the organization. Then you try to understand and interpret it, to provide it a meaning, to ensure that whether it is really good, worthwhile or not. So, if it makes sense, you go for it, otherwise you do not go for it, right. So, basically it creates some kind of assumptions, right. So, let us look some of the challenges, right, which is related to the change and its management. Now, what actually happens to start with? You have a state which could be considered as inertia, and then you realize that the need to go for a change, and then you unfreeze. Now, if you look at this model of change management and another model of change which we discussed in action research approach, which was by Kurt Lewin, where he talked about 3 different stages of change, that was unfreezing, moving and rephrasing. Now, if you compare that model with this model, you find a difference. Here unfreezing is the last stage, and in that model unfreezing was the first stage. The argument was that if you are going to unfreeze, it means that you want to go for a change, and then you bring about a change and then you refreeze, the change gets stabilized. So, these basic assumptions of change has been challenged by this approach, and that is why it starts with a state of inertia. It means at this stage you find that there is some gap between what you have and what you should have, so that you are in a better position to adapt to the environment. For example, the kind of technology that you are using and the kind of technology you should use, right. So, that is going to define the gap, right. So, organizations reach to a point where there is a gap between the changes that is happening in the environment and whether organization is going to adapt to it or not. Say for example, you know that there has been a change in the technology of the production, but you have not been able to adapt to it, right. So, there is a gap which exists and you need to go for this, right. So, the second stage is the need. It means that you need to go for a standardized change program. It means that you need to find a way, a process through which you can better adapt to the changes which is happening in the technology, so that you are able to compete, right. So, the next stage is the need, and then when the need arises, then you unfreeze, right. So, unfreezing here it says that yes, then you go for a change. So, unfreezing does not mean here that you decide about the need for a change. It means that you go for or start the process of the change, right. But it is something that is going on a regular basis, cyclical basis. It means the moment you unfreeze, it means you start the process of change or bring about a change. Again maybe after some time again you reach to a state where you find that there is a gap, right. So, instead of talking about the Levin's model where he discussed about unfreezing, moving and rephrasing, this model or this framework talks about inertia, need and unfreezing, and then again you move to the same stage of what you call inertia, and then again you look for a standardized change program and then go for it, right. So, there is some difference between the action research approach where we talked about the Levin's model and also the sense making approach which is talked about this inertia, need and unfreezing by Korlevik. Now, moving further to discuss this model, what actually happens? when you starts making sense, right. So, first of all you try to find out the meaning of the events, right. Meaning in the sense you try to see that what is happening, why it is happening. So, you try to derive something out of it, right. So, you interpret the actions that is taken by the organization, right, and then there is learning and awareness, yes, why it is happening, and then reality and social construction reality. These are the terms that have been used. It means, then you are in a better position to check the reality, what is going on, and then you try to construct it by engaging yourself with other people, with interacting, relating with other people to better understand what is happening, and then you go for the observations and see that what actually is happening in the field, and depending upon that you make certain action. So, based on your understanding and interpretation of the situation, you are going to take certain actions, right. Now, when we are talking about finding the meaning of the events, sometimes it happens that different people may have different interpretations of the same action the event, right. And why, and we also adopt different ways to look at the things. So, maybe our findings may also be different, and maybe after interpretation we think that okay, we need to go for better control or we do not need to go for this kind of control. It depends all on upon the situation, looking at the say understanding and interpretation based on your observations, because your actions are dependent on the situation that you make, and that is how the sense making process goes on, right. This is what we have been talking about here, right, which we have just discussed. Yes, moving to the next part. Now, this if you look at this framework, this which looks a little complex, but it is not so, right. It basically talks about the decision making process and the ultimate decisions, right. Now, if you try to understand it with from a decision making perspective, what sense making is, then what actually happens. When you are going to take a decision, basically what you do? Your decision making is based upon your understanding and interpretation of the context, event and the situations, right. So, your judgment, that is the decision which we call, right, deciding about what you are going to select. So, since you have a number of alternatives, you decide about which one to select, right, which you are not going to select, for which you need more information, for which you need to consult others. So, when you are going to take a judgment to take a decision, right, what actually happens? Now, this decision making basically is a process, okay, which you call a pre-real time knowledge. So, what happens? You try to collect as much information as possible, you try to strengthen your knowledge and skill base, right, and then you look at the level of uncertainty that is created here, right. So, you look at the opportunities and risks that is involved, and this can be reduced based upon the information that you receive, because that helps you to reduce your ambiguity, right. Then you look at the data. So, based on your information and data, because once you have data, you try to organize them, so that you have a better understanding, which is going to reduce your uncertainty depending upon your knowledge and skill base, so that it is going to make sense of what the objects and events. And once it is able to make sense, it means that you are going to take an action, right. In the process of it, what happens? Look at the information, this is related to information domain. You look for support, you have questions, you look at the facts and information, you also consult others, so that your actions get synchronized with your plan related to any decision which we want to take for the organization. So, this is related to cognitive domain planning. The directives is coming from the information domain, because that is where you are concerned with the information, and here a reality, a physical domain, where actually you are going to take action, but this action based on your interpretation and understanding of the events, right, is going to be based upon the directions, right, your understanding of the situations, including your emotions, right, your beliefs, your perceptions, and then based on this you are going to take a judgment. So, that is why you will find here is a two-way arrows, right. So, you need to ensure that your decisions are synchronous with your values, right, your perspectives and all kind of things. So, this is one framework that has been used to explain how sense making helps you to take a better decision, provided you are able to make use of data and information and interpret the events in such a way, so that it helps you to take a decision. And in the process you also take help from others, you try to understand the context and the situation, and accordingly you plan it, so that you are able to select the best decisions, which really makes sense for you, which you think would be good for the benefit of the organization, right. So, after discussing this conceptual framework, let us look at what actually happens when you are trying to, at the first stage what you do, you try to go for some kind of identity construction. How you make sense of the change, any kind of change event that is happening in the organization, right. So, you go through the stages of what you call inertia, need, and then unphrasing, right. What are the implications, right. So, you look at it from a top down perspective, right, and then you see that whether this need could be avoided or handled with greater skills or not. Then retrospection, retrospection means you think it from or think these actions in from the retrospective sense, because you do not think it today, you may be thinking maybe since last year, or you might be thinking it something is coming, then you start thinking from the past, right. Because sense making could be retrospective in nature. So, you try to understand other organizational events which have happened in the past, how they have impacted the things, and accordingly what kind of things has come out. The plausibility, that is the most important thing, the stories that come out of your understanding and interpretations, right. So, if you find that your stories are plausible, then it gets better acceptance, otherwise not, and then you go for a need for change, right. So, that is nothing else, but what we have been just talking about is that how sense making framework can be used in the context of the organization. Moving further, if you look at this, this is how it actually happens. Now, if you look at this, it talks about what? It starts with the data, from where the information is coming, then you search for the filters, right. That is what we call shoebox, but you also look for the information. So, you search for filters, you also search for the information, and then that is what happens. Okay. So, this is one loop. It depends upon how much effort you make and what is the structure, and then move further. The next level, what you do? You go through it, try to establish some kind of relationship among the events or the data information that you have, how you correlate them, and then you try to find some evidence, right. Once you find this evidence, and this evidence based on what? The schematize. It means that you have develop some kind of a schema, a structure, where you try to look for evidence from the data information that you have collected and the kind of relationship that you have been able to establish. And then based on this schema, you try to build a case for change. So, you look for support for change, or based on that you try to develop a hypothesis, and this hypothesis could be related to sense making, whether you should go for it or not go for it. And here you come out with some kind of plausible explanation, where you create a story and tell it. You evaluate it whether it is going to test your hypothesis or not, and then these plausible stories that you have created based on this all this information, you present it and see whether it is possible to go for it or not, right. So, this is the framework that is used in sense making. Now, moving further, what we are going to discuss, I am giving an example, right. Now, this example has been taken from a book by Thomas Erikson, and he says that sense making process in the management team of a new center in a hospital. So, suppose a hospital wants to come out with a new center. So, how the management team is going to create this sense making process. Now, if you move further to this, what actually happens? They will try to get information and data as much as possible, so that they can have something, right, and then they move further to create more evidence, right, and then they create some kind of schema, look for evidence, and then they develop some hypothesis that what kind of center it would be, how it work, whether it is going to be successful or not, right. So, you do all kind of say make propositions basically at this stage, and then you narrate it, right, before you make a presentation. But in the process what actually happens, look at this. There are two dimensions, one is known as bracketing degree and the other one is cognitive profile. So, the cognitive profile of the team, right. So, see how what kind of different kind of meaning that has been created by the management team here. So, if you go for high bracketing, better holding, then in a heterogeneous group you have different kind of team, right. So, you look at the vision behind the change. If it is a homogeneous group, then you look for a collective meaning, right. If there is a low bracketing, low holding, then it is fragmented, right. So, you look for more information before you go further, and here you try to create some kind of enclave, so that you can derive some meaning out of it, but that is not clustered, it could be different, because each people are having different kind of say proposition for it. So, now if you look at this example of sense making and try to analyze it using this one, you will find that you can be in any one of them when it comes to understanding and interpreting this event. That event is here the center in a hospital. So, this is the kind of change that you want to bring. Now, how the management team is going to make sense of it, depending upon their cognitive profile, their knowledge and skill base. If it is heterogeneous or homogeneous, it would differ, or if their bracketing is low or high, holding is low or high, then what will happen. So, you create different kind of meaning. That is why one of the propositions in sense making that has been made, that people understand and interpret and provide various meaning to the same kind of input, right. Then moving further, if you look at this week who created this framework, and he talks about 7 different aspects of it. So, first is identity construction. So, you need a person who is going to make sense of it, right. It could be singular or individual, right. So, this person is going to construct the identity of what sense making would be, right, how what kind of sense he is going to make. Then retrospective, right. Retrospective, it means that it could be either for the past also, right, or even afterwards, depending upon the success. Then this retrospection makes the past clear. The idea of looking into the past, and that is why we say that it is retrospective, is that you look at the past, what happened in the past, then your future, right. Because if your past is good, then you think that okay, the future will also be good. So, this kind of assumptions are based, which could be a kind of sense making exercise, right. So, moving further, the third stage you enact, right. So, you look at the kind of environment, try to collect as much information as possible, see that how the environment is going to behave and what kind of meaning you are going to derive out of this environment. Then the social reality, right. It depends upon your thinking and functioning. So, how you relate this with others, right, what kind of influence it will have on you, right. So, whether you are going to have a coordinated effort to understand it or not. or whether you are going to think independently or collectively. So, all this is related to what you call the social. So, would you call it a social process provided you go and do it collectively? If it is not, then it may not be social, because the reality depends upon what meaning you have derived, and but how you have derived. If it is through a social process, it means that there are a number of people who are involved and they have tried to make understand and interpret the things in a way possible. Then moving to the next stage, that is ongoing. It means that is an ongoing process, it never stops. People continuously try to understand and interpret events or any kind of change that happens in the organization, whether it is incremental or transformational, and they also try to get out some extra cues focused on and by extracted cues. So, whatever cues are being extracted, that is what we call the evidence, right. So, based on that evidence, you try to see what needs to be done, because the evidence is filtered by you, and based on that your interest, you try to look at it, and finally plausibility. You do not go by the accuracy, right, because you try to find out a question. So, the moment you get it, you stop, right. You are not going to evaluate further alternatives. So, you try to look at something that is plausible, and so you go by it, right. So, once you have created a story or you have taken a decision related to the change, you think that it is good, then stop searching for more alternatives, right. So, this is the sense making framework that we have been discussing, right. Look at some of the examples that is used, like in identity construction, you try to think who I am, or how and what I think. Retrospective, to learn what I think, I look back over at what I said earlier. So, look at the past. Enactment, I create the object to be seen and inspected. Social, what I say and single out and conclude are determined by who socialized me and how I was socialized, right. Ongoing, my talking is spread across time, right, for other projects, right. Then extracted cues, the what I singled out and established as the content of the thought. So, what has come out in terms of evidence, that the content that you have created, and plausibility is related to I need to know enough about what I think to get on with me. So, if you been able to make sense, then you stop, no more search. You think that it is sufficient and plausible, right. Sometimes it may take precedence over accuracy, because you do not look for accuracy, right. So, now if you look at this sense making approach to change management, one thing that can be said, that this is a process through which you try to understand and event the change by getting information, looking at the information, evaluating them, and see whether it makes sense for you or not, and then you go for it or do not go for it, right. So, that is about what you call the sense making approach. Thank you very much.